안녕하세요. 매일매일 운동하기를 실천하고 있는 동탄 왕코입니다. 오늘은 5월 2일. 어제 5월 1일이었는데 달이 바뀐 걸 얘기를 안 했네요. 오늘은 5월 2일. 드디어 5월 달이 오고 말았네요. 가정의 달이죠. 날씨가 어제 날씨 진짜 춥고 그랬는데 오늘 날씨 너무 화창합니다. 근데 밖에는 좀 쌀쌀하다고 하네요. 와, 일단 오늘 쉬고 내일도 쉽니다. 그래서 이틀 쉬기 때문에 운동을 최대한 많이 해볼게요. 뭐 특이사항 있습니까? 요즘에 코로나 안 끝나고 요즘에 인도가 또 난리 났죠. 백신 접종은 계속 꾸준히 하고 있고, 그 다음에 뭐 없네요. 오늘도 운동하겠습니다. 운동할 때 CNN이죠.
American by residents. It is important to me that those same strands of inclusivity that flow through me are mirrored in the stories that we tell. One World is a place where Africa has an equal seat at the global table alongside Europe, the Americas, and Asia. Every continent has a voice, and where everyone watching has a stake in the global conversation.
One World with Zain Asher, Tuesday to Saturday on CNN.
There, another shot.
Coronavirus. To get daily news updates in your inbox, sign up to the CNN newsletter. Coronavirus. Fact versus fiction.
The Dangote Group stands at the forefront of African enterprise. Since 1978, we've touched the lives of millions of people by meeting their basic needs. Our belief in the promise of Africa has taken us into 14 African countries, with substantial investments that will propel the continent towards greater prosperity, promising jobs, improved standards of living, and economic growth. Dangote, for an empowered Africa.
The Profit Point, in association with Dangote.
Welcome back. Founded in 2001, Tree Cape Fruits has quickly become South Africa's largest exporter of apples and pears. CNN's Cyril Barnier sat down with the company's managing director, Ralph Pinard, to talk about how they pick export markets and how where you live can determine the size of fruit you prefer.
From a marketing perspective, you have to be able to relate and to engage with call it the formal retailer, with the tie through to the person actually on the informal market. You have to understand what the customer wants. My name is Rolf Pinar. I'm the Managing Director of Tree Cape Fruit Marketing in South Africa.
Tell us about the first apple that was picked in the Western Cape. I believe the year was 1650, and your company has done research on that.
We spend a lot of time on understanding our heritage, and the apple was the bitter vein apple. We basically focused on basically getting the origin of that tree. We replanted the tree recently in a Cape company's garden in Cape Town. So we were quite proud. That was the start of the apple and pear industry in South Africa, and it's a huge employer, a huge contributor to the economy of South Africa.
Run us through that. You replanted the same tree that grew the original apple in the Western Cape.
We got a distant relative of that. So we basically had to go to Europe, find the tree, and then bring that back and replanted it in South Africa. The variety didn't exist anymore. What you have to keep in mind is apples and pears, the variety constantly changes. I mean, if I take these days, we sell Fuji or a Pink Lady or a Braven. I mean, in those days, they only had a few varieties, which is no longer commercially planted.
Going back to the fact that you're the largest distributor of apples and pears for South Africa, has there been something that really allowed you to scale up and become what you are today?
I think the turning point for us is understanding the market. When you travel into Nigeria and walk the streets, you see how the people buy an 18-kilo box and then they would put it in a bag and resell it on the street corners. And you look at the challenges in terms of climate and in terms of the humidity in certain parts of the country and the culture. And when you start understanding that concept and you can get customers coming back to you year after year after year, that for me was a turning point in our business. You have to try and balance profitability with sustainability.
You do business across the world, with Europe, with Asia, of course, across Africa. How did the pandemic impact your bottom line from that perspective?
What COVID has done is there's been, if I look at the local market in South Africa, there's been a certain disposable income, and a lot of that has been spent on healthy eating. So fortunately, apples and pears is considered a healthy snack, and I think from that perspective, we've had a relatively positive 2020 in terms of demand.
What are the opportunities for growth in your industry?
I think access to new markets. You know, if I take China recently opened up for South African apples. We're still waiting for China to open up for South African pears. So that for me is it's a massive market, and I think the possibilities are exciting. I think the second thing is, again, the focus on new varieties. Basically, we have to be at the forefront of that, and consumers are constantly looking for better color and new exciting varieties. A few years ago, we opened up a distribution center in Johannesburg. It's in Africa. I think one of the biggest challenges is distribution and sugaring Coca-Cola chain.
Tell us about your marketing efforts on social media platforms, because you had a really good run marketing one of your apple varieties, Kanzi, with a Kanzi video on TikTok.
That social media strategy actually worked really well for us. What we saw was that there's an opportunity to get to the buyers of produce via their phones or using social media. So that for us was a change in strategy. We started using TikTok. Started putting videos on YouTube, and actually I think we're still learning, but we saw success in doing that. So that's more focused on the local market. We're trying a few things now with Flash Gala in China and in Malaysia this year. So it's going to be exciting to see how that pans out in using social media specifically. I'm excited about online and online sales, even on the local market in South Africa. There's going to be an exciting space to watch. I think in the next 10 years, it's going to be interesting to see where the industry is at in terms of just technology and the drive towards getting closer to that consumer. I think formal retail, as we know it, will change.
That does it for us here on Marketplace Africa. Remember, you can head to our website for the latest stories and keep up with us on social media as well. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Zane Asher. I'll see you next time in the Marketplace.
The Profit Point, in association with Dangote.
Imagine we could create a web of connectivity of operating rooms all around the world.
If you invent something, that will be there forever.
I see 3D printing and drone technology helping us to address the gaps that we have in healthcare delivery.
I'm Nikki Shields for CNN's Saved by the Future, where we see how today's inventors are engineering medical marvels for tomorrow and beyond.
Saved by the Future, Saturday on CNN, in association with Hyundai. No holds barred.
Out front tonight, hypocrite in chief. So let me just put it to you straight, Senator. Senate Democrats, they're getting their butts kicked.
No nonsense.
Are you simply shooting the messenger because you don't like the message?
Facts first.
How stupid do you think we are? Allies in Washington are covering for him, and they shouldn't get away with it.
Because getting to the truth matters.
The Washington Post went and confirmed the date of that hearing, so you're telling me unless I go back to the time capsule, you're not going to believe it.
Aaron Burnett out front, Tuesday to Saturday on CNN. The Dangote Group stands at the forefront of African enterprise, with substantial investments that will propel the continent towards greater prosperity. Dangote, for an empowered Africa.
biggest economic trends impacting the continent I'm saying Asha. In 2020, the Ivory Coast produced nearly 1 million metric tons of latex and led the continent when it came to natural rubber production, according to the country's Association of Natural Rubber Professionals. Now the country has its sights set on climbing even higher. Take a look. Ivorian farmer Roger Akusi is busy at work, cutting and peeling this hevia tree. The prize, natural rubber.
I was in the palm oil business originally. I realized that rubber was better, so I left that field. I can see the difference.
Akusi is one of thousands of farmers in the Ivory Coast working in the country's growing rubber industry. Today, it is the country's second most exported agricultural product, right behind cocoa.
In 2005, we barely had 15,000 growers, plus those who already had the rubber estates. Today, we have about 160,000 producers with an estimated 600,000 hectares of orchards. And production has increased from 150,000 tons to 950,000 tons.
Everyday items like gloves, tires, and some shoes require rubber.
Rubber is a very good business. The cultivated rubber tree feeds its grower. After 7 years of hard work, it will live for at least 30 to 40 years.
The Ivory Coast was the fourth largest natural rubber producer in the world at the end of 2020, with Thailand holding the top spot. APROMAC, the organization that oversees the industry in Ivory Coast, says the French-speaking nation produced around 850,000 tons last year, with 60 to 80% exported to Asia. The country is also the top supplier within Africa, providing almost 80% of the continent's rubber, a number the organization hopes will continue to increase.
I'm concerned with how we're going to ensure that the rubber is consumed by Ivorians locally and then regionally. Once we've done that, I won't even need to go elsewhere to sell our rubber because the needs are already there.
The focus on localization stems from lessons learned from the coronavirus pandemic, which impacted supply chains around the world.
80% of our rubber went into the automotive industry, the tire industry. But with the pandemic, everything stopped. From now on, we must no longer be dependent on our essential raw materials. We must be able to ensure that consumption is provided by our fellow citizens locally, and to a lesser extent from around us.
Nous identifions tous les produits finis à base de caoutchouc naturel.
We identified all the finished products made of natural rubber that Ivorians consume. It might be the soles of my shoes, my sneakers, surgical gloves. Since the pandemic started, the need for gloves has increased tenfold, or even 100-fold in some regions.
D'être de simples livreurs.
We have to go to the next level by making rubber a little more elaborate, which would be used either to make mattresses or to make condoms, things that are essentially made in Asia. In any case, today we have a level of production that allows us to look towards this direction, and that's exactly what we are doing.
The goal? To put a Made in Ivory Coast label on all products from the West African nation. Unlike other sectors in the country, the rubber industry benefits from consistent pricing.
L'APROMAC fixe le prix.
APROMAC sets the price. It's based monthly on the Singapore Stock Exchange and converted from dollars to euros, and from euros to CFA francs. We take into account the rubber prices every month. This fixed price is applicable to all actors in the sector during the month. The following month, we repeat the same exercise, so that seasonal fluctuations do not negatively impact anyone in the industry. Everyone is on the same page. Prices follow a curve, and there are peaks that appear, but the annual average remains constant.
The challenge, instead, is combating deforestation while creating a sustainable industry.
Pour envoyer notre environnement, nous sommes très proches.
We decided that we had to bring something more to the rubber plantation. How can we make sure that the environment and population who live in Abidjan have clean air? As a result, in addition to our plantations, this year we have initiated more than 150 hectares of forest trees in collaboration with the Ministry of Water and Forests. Our initiative in agroforestry has both the rubber tree and the forest in the same space. There is the spacing between the lines of rubber trees where we put a line of forest trees in the middle. At the end of the day, in both the short and long term, the rubber tree will produce a financial payoff, and the forest tree will provide as vegetation cover and a bonus in sustaining the environment.
Acromax says the burgeoning industry brought in nearly $900 million in 2018, and they anticipate that number will rise. The focus for industry leaders now, finding ways to stretch that success. Up next, we see how one multinational company based in South Africa is looking to expand on its legacy.
Dangote for an empowered Africa. We live in an unpredictable environment. My show brings you the latest news and top news makers.
Tuesday to Saturday on CNN.
Let's get after it.
Cases are still going up. This virus has enormous capabilities.
It's quiet on too much.
Black lives do matter. Too many people are getting the infection.
Tuesday through Saturday on CNN. The Dangote Group stands at the forefront of African enterprise. Since 1978, we've touched the lives of millions of people by meeting their basic needs. Our belief in the promise of Africa has taken us into 14 African countries, with substantial investments that will propel the continent towards greater prosperity, promising jobs, improved standards of living, and economic growth. Dangote, for an empowered Africa.
The Profit Point, in association with Dangote.
Welcome back. From selling coats and blankets to operating in automotive, logistics, and machinery sectors on multiple continents, South African company Barlow World has spent nearly 120 years adapting, acquiring, and expanding. CNN's Cyril Vanier caught up with Barlow World Group CEO Dominic Sewela to talk about the company's plans for the future and where he sees opportunities for growth.
I think as a leader, from time to time, you need to be able to say, what have you been successful at and what have you not been successful at? And be able to call it when you're not successful. My name is Dominic Sewela. I'm the Chief Executive of Barlow World.
What struck me about the history of Barlow World is it's so interesting. It's one of those companies that started almost 120 years ago with Mr. Barlow, Ernest Barlow, starting a wool company.
It started all in 1902. Major Ernest Barlow was out here as part of the British troops during the Anglo-Boer War. After the war, he liked the country so much that he decided to stay behind. The family back in Lancashire in the UK had 2 wool mills. Out of that, he was able to start those Barlows and Sons, mainly selling the blankets.
The company has gone from just selling those blankets to spanning so many sectors, from car rental, managing industrial equipment, to consumer products. So you just bought a grain company. How did you expand from what you were then to what you are now?
It all started with Caterpillar business. I think the turning point was when we were able to be distributor of Caterpillar business back in 1927. Out of that, we became a conglomerate in the 80s, where basically we were 79 out of Fortune 500. We employed 240,000 people. In the 90s, we unbundled the bulk of the business. We had another unbundling, in 2006-7, and where we are now left with the business that we have.
It seems to me there were several turning points. One being in the 70s and 80s when the company expanded into mining and pharmaceuticals. Tell us about what drove that expansion.
One of the key issues, for companies really to, find a way of surviving is a crisis. If you think about the major crisis that happened, post-depression, one of the key ones in South Africa was the apartheid, when there was a lot of sanctions against companies that were invested in South Africa. And those companies, as they sought to leave the country, they had to find buyers for their businesses. Barlow saw that an opportunity to be buying most of those businesses. That's really how we were able to garner so many businesses. But then when it came to South Africa became a democracy, the market didn't quite like, conglomerates. The company had to unbundle. And Barlow World focused more around businesses that were geared towards infrastructure, because we are anticipating that with the new government, there's going to be growth in infrastructure.
But it seems there was another turning point, which was in the 90s, and you started doing business in Russia. You're also doing business in Siberia.
It's really around emerging market. We believe that, as Barlow World, our DNA is very strong in emerging markets. In Southern Africa, we probably operate in about 12 countries and very difficult areas like the DRC, if you've been, Mozambique and Angola. And so the DNA of our people is used to operating in that environment. And so our expansion into Siberia was the next logical place, because if you think about infrastructure, the mining activity in that area, our view is that when we operate in those types of areas, we have the right understanding.
The company plans to sell off parts of the business that it doesn't see doing as well in the long term, such as the logistics, if I'm not mistaken. So walk us through that thinking.
I believe that Caterpillar is our core business. It's a very cyclical business. You've got to have some kind of business that's counter-cyclical. It mustn't be too far off, in terms of maybe where you operate in. And our view is that the grain business, which is more food, it's going to give us growth in the areas where we're currently operating in Africa. It's a very defensive side of the business. And with urbanization in Africa, people are now relying more on processed food. So our view was that we're not going to get on the consumer side of food, but more on the industrial consumer side, where we actually prepare ingredients to supply to industries, people that we know how to do business with.
What does Barlow World look like in, say, 5 to 10 years?
The next 5 years, Barlow World is going to be a company made up of 2 divisions. It will be an equipment business, distributing Caterpillar products across at least 16 of those regions. On the other hand, we will be having a food ingredient business across the rest of Africa. And that's basically going to be the Barlow World of the future, that's more focused and specializes in the areas where it operates in.
That does it for us here on Marketplace Africa, and you can head to our website for the latest stories and keep with us on social media as well. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Zain Asher. I'll see you next time in the Marketplace.
The Profit Point, in association with Dangote.
There is a unique place where humans, nature, and culture have thrived together for millennia. Today, we open the next chapter of Olola's legacy, the Journey Through Time Master Plan, bringing life to the world's largest cultural oasis regeneration project. 5 districts, 5 heritage sites, and 15 new cultural assets emerged to create the world's largest living museum. Join us in opening the next chapter in Olola's legacy.
Tonight, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton joins Fareed. From the economy to the plan for Afghanistan, her assessment of President Biden's first 100 days. Plus, what should he do about Putin? Fareed Zakaria, GPS. Tonight.
Business is all about making connections. And some connections are easier to make than others. With a CNN partner hotel, the world is always at your fingertips. CNN partner hotels, connected to your world.
Curiosity. This is CNN 10. My name is Carl Zeus. I'll be your explainer-in-chief. Global news. International relations are the key factors. Relevant stories. Everyday people whose action is changing their community. Complex issues. Explained. We're going back to the future. And 10-second trivia. You get a perfect 10 out of 10. All in 10 minutes. Stream at youtube.com/CNN10.
I'm Tamana Kadachi Aman, and this is CNN.
Hello and welcome to our viewers all around the world. I'm Michael Holmes. Thanks for your company. Coming up here on CNN Newsroom, desperate for each and every breath, hoping that it's not the last. India's COVID crisis, nothing short of a catastrophe. Sarajevo under siege, a country no stranger to war, now battles another kind of war with an invisible enemy. And later, on the long journey home, 4 astronauts are on their way back to Earth this hour after a record-breaking mission. And we begin in India, where COVID-19 now spreading faster and